Hi, I'm Leah Clark. I'm a senior lecturer in art history at the Open University, and I specialise in the exchange and collection of art objects at the end of the 15th century in the Italian courts.
Hi, I'm Catherine Wilson and I'm senior lecturer in medieval history at the University of Chester, and I'm interested in the uses and the producers of luxury and everyday objects in the 14th and the 15th centuries.
Today we're in the Grosvenor Museum in Chester, and we're going to be looking at some tiles which were used as the starting point for our Arts and Humanities Research Council grant called the Mobility of Objects Across Boundaries, or MOB.
MOB is a collaborative interdisciplinary project which reconsiders the history of material culture in the period 1000 to 1700. And by material culture, we simply mean the objects that surround us in our everyday lives. And quite simply, in the period 1000 to 1700, more objects were produced than ever before, and they travelled across geographic, cultural, political, class and linguistic boundaries.
So one of the aims of MOB is to consider the mobility of objects in the past and what did that mean for the objects, but also for the people that handled them and used them. One definition of MOB is a gathering of people coming together, but we wanted to extend this to think about how things could also be included in that, how people and things come together, and through their mobility they give rise to the transfer of motifs, of ideas and knowledge.
Studying the mobility of objects requires attention not only to the fluidity of objects, but at points when the objects were stopped in time or when they were transferred from one space and into another.
If we take tiles as a starting point, we can think how they're halted in settings, for instance, on the floor, but how the motifs are mobile. They get translated into new contexts on new objects.
This is a collection of medieval floor tiles. They've been found in ecclesiastical, that's religious buildings, all across Chester. All of these tiles have been made from the same material, that's clay. So the clay would have been dug out of the ground and formed into a series of squares using a mould. And then all of these floor tiles here have been stamped with designs. The ones that you can see here have all been glazed, and that means that a thin solution of clay mixed with water has been poured over the top of them, and this glaze was often coloured with different natural ingredients. So we have yellows and greens and some dark ones. This was designed to make the tiles look pretty and shiny and stand out. And if you imagine, if you were back in a medieval church, they didn't have electric lighting, and they had candles which illuminated the whole building. So all of this shiny material here on the floors would have been picked out by the candlelight and would have made for part of the experience for the people visiting. They have lots of different designs, and they would have had a stamp that would have pressed into the top of them, which means that a lot of them are mass produced, and we get the same sorts of designs coming up from lots of different religious houses across Chester and even further afield. One of the most interesting tiles in the collection is this one here. It was found in Chester Cathedral and would have been part of a much bigger floor. You can see it's got 3 hares inscribed on it, and this is a type of medieval riddle or puzzle. Although each hare has got 2 ears, there's only 3 ears drawn on the tile, and this is something that medieval people would have found interesting and intriguing. The design itself has come a really long way. It's not from around Chester. The original design comes from a cave in China, and it dates to the late 6th, 7th century. So it's thousands of years old, and it's travelled thousands of miles. This particular design shows how not just objects can travel across borders and across boundaries, but about how ideas can as well. They show quite a lot of humour in them, some of the tiles. So this one here shows a little lion with his tongue sticking out. We have ones that have got words on, so these would have formed parts of big inscriptions, sometimes a religious inscription or sometimes someone's name, an important person who went to that church or was to be remembered in that church. So you can see here this one is a white lion tile, and we have another one that's just the same here as they were mass produced. And they're very common in some of the religious houses in Chester, but most notably in Vale Royal Abbey, which is a little bit further out in Northwich. And we have lion and daisy, and we've got double-headed eagles. So all of them had a meaning, and when they were set in the floor all together, because they weren't just individual tiles, they would have created a great big image or great big picture, which would have looked colourful and also would have meant something to the people who were visiting there. These items are really interesting to look at today. If you imagine, they were all made as parts of floors, so they were designed to be walked over, but they're clearly very colourful and very decorative, and they give us an insight into the ways that medieval buildings would have looked for the people who were going into them. And they also show the personalities and the interests and the humour of the medieval people who lived around here too.